Pictures, photos, and images. Welcome back to Sound the Siren. I'm Xavier.
I'm Dylan. Welcome back to another review, and this time it's the round three review. And we do have a special guest today, and I think he's going to present himself. Here he is. Darcy, how are you today?
Go Crom.
Hey, Tom. I like the beanie, and you've got a Brisbane jersey too. And I know that you're not happy or content with your team, and I'm not too happy with mine either. But Save, how are you, and how are you feeling after your Blues performance on the
Yeah,
weekend?
I'm good. And whilst you guys may not be happy with your team's performance, I'm ecstatic with mine. So I'm happy to review this round, perhaps more so than any of the other rounds this year.
Yeah, I think that the Saints and the Kangas probably showed off their worst performances in recent years, but we'll jump into the first game, and it was the Lions versus the Pies, and what a finish it was. It was a great game, and I think Jared Lyons for the Lions ironically proved that he's a bona fide Jet, and 29 touches for him, but an absolute great game capped off by the man Zac Bailey, who probably should have had a free kick the week before, but managed to avenge their 1 point loss and turn it into a 1 point win.
Yeah, I think the script was pretty well written by the AFL. I mean, we know in round two, Zac Bailey had the tackle on, I think it was Mark Blicavs, that ultimately would have won them the game but didn't. So it was good to see him get the kick after the siren to give them the win and the lead and the win. And I think he's developing into a really good player as well. Not just because he kicked the goal after the siren, but I think the last year and a half, both me and my father have been watching him a lot, and we think he could be very good and is becoming a very good player.
Yep. I really liked Zach Bailey's quick impression of half the Collingwood cheer squad as well. It was just a bit of a taunt, losing a tooth there while kicking the winning goal against Collingwood. I feel like that was a bit of added irony, but it shows that Brisbane's a pretty good team if they manage to still beat Collingwood when Lachie Neale has a terrible performance and has had terrible performances over the first 3 weeks.
Yeah, and a question that was arising out of the game is what is Brodie Grundy's impact? Is he elite in the ruck and maybe the midfields aren't producing, or does he need to change his attack towards the ruck?
I've got two things to say. I'm going to address one of them really quickly, and then I'll address the question you had. The first one, uh, you said how good it proves how talented Brisbane were, and I think this win was like really needed because if they don't win this, they fall to 0-3 after getting pumped pretty badly by the Swans in round one and then losing on that tackle against Geelong. But then you talked about Brodie Grundy's impact, and I think I'm going to talk about this a fair bit in this episode, but I think there's been a fair bit of like knee-jerk reactions from the media, not just this year, but fairly recently. And I think Brodie Grundy has fallen a bit of a victim to that. We saw he played like one bad game, one bad half really, and people start to write him off. They're like, the rules don't fit him. He's after these rule changes, he's no longer a good player, and it just doesn't make any sense at all. Plays one bad game, and all of a sudden he's not a good player. But he really showed his class this week, and I'm glad that people are starting to realise that it's not going to affect him that much, and he's still a star of the competition.
Yeah.
For me, I have done a bit of research this week, and I'm beginning to question the role of the ruck in the modern game and their importance. So I looked into it. We've only had the last All-Australian ruck to then win a premiership in the same year was Dean Cox, I believe 2005, 6. But he was on the bench. And the last ruck to be named as the All-Australian ruckman and to win the premiership was 1996, Corey McKernan. So that just shows that the first or second best ruck has only won the premiership twice in the last 25 years. So that made me question it. And I looked further into it, and I looked at the top 10 highest hit-out counts of all time in a single game, and 6 out of 10 of those ruckman lost in that game. So it proves that ruckman can have an incredibly dominant performance in the ruck and still not win, showing that they might not actually be that important.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we can take away from this is Darcy's the number one hater on ruckman. But interesting, I think in that Dean Cox year, I think Nat Newey was the starting ruckman. So
But in
two on the same premiership team
2006.
in the same year. Perhaps not.
Not
Um,
that.
I do think there is still a role for ruckman in the league, and I think it can be a damaging role as well. We saw Nick Nat-Nui, I think he's been tearing teams up this year with his tap work, and I think when you get first use from the centre, it can be really damaging and really helpful for your team. I think Carlton is a team, my team obviously, and I think they've been penalised quite a bit this year from not getting first use. I think Mark Pittenay isn't quite up to the same tier as some of the better ruckmen in the league, and I think we've been hurt a little bit on that. But I think your argument about Premiership ruckman is just about the only one there is. Just looking through premierships like Richmond in 2020, they had Nankervis and Solberg. Richmond again with Nankervis again. West Coast, who didn't even have Nat Nui playing. Richmond again, whose second ruck was Grigg. The Western Bulldogs, Hawthorn.
Yeah, for the Western Bulldogs there, Bontempelli had 9 hitouts in the grand final. So that was my next point. Do you think the game needs to develop to make the ruckman an extra midfielder rather than just a ruckman itself? I think the Suns, it's not confirmed. There's a good chance they could be playing Hugh Greenwood in the ruck this weekend. And I'd like to see how that goes and how it helps him out.
Yeah, I was going to say that after you brought that up, I think Hugh Greenwood is almost a certainty to ruck this week because of Gold Coast injuries with Jared Witts having an ACL injury. They've got Matt Conroy is injured. Zac Smith as well is injured. So I think they're going to try and test out your theory. I'm not sure how beneficial it will be. And I think Carlton's actually playing Gold Coast this week. So maybe Mark Pittenay will have his chance to give us first use of the ball. Yeah, he is. So hopefully he can do something for Carlton. But I still think there's a role for ruckman, and I think it can still work.
On to the Good Friday doubleheader in the first game, Darce. I want your opinions on your Kangaroos, who unfortunately were absolutely dominated by the Bulldogs by 128 points. I know you've heard that throughout the weekend, but I thought I'd just reiterate it to you one more time.
Very disappointing, yeah. So I went to the game on Friday. Walking in, I was very excited. First live footy game in probably nearly 2 years. So I was very excited for the live game. Right, I thought we were going to we were doing really well, but then we scored a goal that was overturned by the DRS, whatever it's called, the ARC. And then from that moment onwards, we were just destroyed. All our momentum was crushed. I actually thought we were going to get up and about and had a chance, but all the momentum was crushed. Josh Bruce tore us apart, and it was pretty embarrassing. Left 10 minutes to go. Yeah.
So I think this game was really embarrassing for North Melbourne because all of the build-up that they had all week, there were people in the media calling for North Melbourne to lose the Good Friday match, which I don't side with. But then the North Melbourne coach and several players came out and said that there's no way they should lose it and they're going to draw a crowd and they're going to compete every week. And then if you say that, then you have to come in and you have to not win, but you have to at least have a crack. And they got pumped, 128 points. I can't really remember the last time a team even lost by a number that big. We've talked about low-scoring games, and the Bulldogs come out and score 167 points. Every single centre bounce, they just walked it out every single time. So I think it's really embarrassing for North Melbourne, and I think they've done some pretty poor moves over the last couple of years that haven't really helped them. I know we've talked about it a little bit with the Saints, but I think North Melbourne have had some questionable pickups, namely Aaron Hall.
We're paying way too much for what he comes.
So you paid Aaron Hall, and now he's not old, but he's 26, I think. And he's been your sub. He was good in this game for a North Melbourne player, but he was the sub in round 2, and he's actually been dropped a couple of times since he's come. So
he's hardly he played last year.
Yeah, it's not good for him or North Melbourne, and I think that's a questionable pickup. But I think North Melbourne have some big problems, not just this year, but in the years to come. So hopefully, for Darcy's sake, they can lift. But if they don't have a crack this week, who are they versing? Against Adelaide. If they don't have a crack against them, I'm probably going to come on here and write them off for this year and the next 10.
Yeah, I usually watch the games focusing more on looking for promise rather than actually winning, because obviously we're not going to win many. But I look for players Luke Davies, Uniac, and Stevenson to look promising. Zeebel's our best player, and he's rubbish. That's just never a good sign.
I think David King had a crack at Zeeble at halftime as well for not playing well because, as you've been saying on the podcast, he's been playing defence, but he hasn't been defending. So that's not great to see. But also the other questionable decision I wanted to bring up was their coaching hires. So we know they rehired Scott and then got rid of him just a couple of months later. Then they brought in Reece Shaw and then he's left as well now. And now they've got another coach again. So I think, yeah, they're in a bit of trouble, North. What do you think?
Faith in Noble.
I guess the only real positive out of the North Melbourne game was the scoring in terms of having full quarters back. And I mean, the crowd got to witness 167 points, which we haven't seen for a couple of years. But
on the flip side of that, though, they also got to witness 39 points.
I know, but you expect that. Sometimes back in the day, 2009, there was always 80-point wins, and we don't see it as regularly now. So, kind of
is that because scoring's dried up, or because the competition is
the defense is
closer, or because the competition's closer? I mean, the 18th team is almost as good as, or is closer to being as good as the first team as it was back in 2009.
I think a more defensive approach has been taken by coaches. It's become less score more the other team, rather it's become more prevent the other team from scoring more than you, rather than score more than the other team, which Sydney's not doing, and I think that's why they're doing well so far.
I'm going to move on quickly so we don't get stuck on the North game for another 10 minutes, and we'll talk about the resurrection of Taylor Walker. Another bag for him, and they won a tight game against the Suns at Adelaide Oval. And in my opinion, this was a fantastic game to watch. If you look at it on paper, I think Adelaide, Gold Coast, it's going to be a close game, but maybe not enthralling. But it was pretty intriguing from my perspective, and I enjoyed it the whole way through.
Yeah, Taylor Walker's just about the only point I have for this game. He was pretty much written off last year. He could barely get a touch and barely kick a goal. And I think he's got like 13 goals through 3 rounds, or 17 goals through 3 rounds. So that's incredible. So well done to him for revitalising his career.
Yep, it looks like it's the year of the full forward again. It's great to see. Had 3 big bags over the weekend. We had Tex, we had Harry Mackay, and we had Josh Bruce. So it's great to see. Sort of reminds you of, obviously we weren't alive, but the 80s when it was the Locketts and the Dunstalls, they were scoring big bags every week. And hopefully we get to see 100 goal scorer this year.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a chance. And possibly Tex. There's a few others. Harry Mackay kicked 7, which we'll get to shortly. And for the Suns, Alex Sexton's been out of form. He only had 5 disposals on the weekend with 1 point to his name. So if he can get involved, I think they'll be able to capitalise on their opportunities more. Now, the Saturday game was
Just really quickly on Josh Bruce.
Yep.
He's played 19 games for the Bulldogs now, and he's kicked 28 goals, and 16 of which have come against North Melbourne. So yeah. 12 goals through 17 games and 16 through 2. So I think you might like seeing North Melbourne on his fixture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And his top 3 career highs are against North Melbourne with 10, 6 and 6. And that's in the last 3 years, respectively.
I reckon that's most players, though. Buddy Franklin, 13 against North. I think it's just something to get used to.
The Tigers and the Swans midfield was on point. Chad Warner, the Rising Star nomination. And once again, Errol Goulden, Braden Campbell, and the likes of Sam Wicks were all outstanding.
Yeah, I think in particular Wicks and Warner. Wicks, I think, just found his way to popping up inside forward 50 and taking easy marks just over and over again. And Warner dominated all games. So very promising from Sydney. I think they finished 16th last year and now they're 3-0. So they'll definitely be looking to make a finals push.
I wouldn't be too worried if I was the Tigers, though. I think it's a good wake-up call, if anything.
They do this every year.
I 100% agree. I think the last 3 years, or their last 3 premiership years, I had a friend telling me, a Richmond fan was telling me that they got pumped in each of their premiership years in round 3. So maybe you can look into that. But there's not much as I was talking about before, like the knee-jerk reaction, I don't think he can react to one loss in a round 3 game for the back-to-back premiers. So I don't think too much concern for them.
Yep, and Sydney looked great. Sort of poses the question of whether they actually need Buddy or not. Do you reckon, obviously he's a great player, but do you reckon he will help the team by being in? Because I feel like you noticed last week he just got kicked to a lot rather than potentially better options.
I think the question of need and should he be playing is sort of separate, because in a sense, I don't think they need him because he's over 30, as we all know, and Sydney's a rebuilding team. But I think that he should definitely be playing, and he can definitely be helpful because he's been a star of our competition for a long time, and I think he's still got a lot to give. And I think most importantly, I can't even think of his name. The new forward, what's his name?
Logan Mcdonald.
Yeah, Logan Mcdonald. He's going to be getting the second defender every week when Buddy Franklin's playing, which
Even
I
the
think can really
third.
help your development. Yeah, or maybe even the third, given they've got Sam Reid as well. But if you're like an 18-year-old kid coming into the league and you're getting the best defender on every team every week, I think that can really hurt your development. But with players like Buddy and you get lesser defenders, you're going to kick more goals, and I think he can develop better. So I think it's going to help him, having him around and having him in the team. So I think he can definitely be helpful.
We'll skip the next game and we'll move to the night games. And on the Saturday night, it was the West Coast Eagles against the Port Power.
What game are we skipping?
Don't worry about it.
What game are we skipping?
The game I was at.
So we're talking about Essendon and St Kilda for today. So Essendon finished on 143 with St Kilda only on 68. It was a bit of an embarrassing performance from St Kilda. Your thoughts, Xavier?
Yeah, I think what we can read into this game, Darcy, is that St Kilda are horrible and probably won't make the finals.
They are pretenders, yeah.
Is that a knee-jerk reaction, Zav?
I think maybe more so last week. I was writing off the Bombers. I think they were trash and they had some bad injuries. But to be honest, I don't really rate St Kilda that highly. At the moment, they sit 16th, which is below the likes of Carlton and Hawthorn, as well as Essendon. They've got one win, which came from a Dan Butler free kick that the AFL came out and said wasn't a free kick, although I disagree with that. And then they've got a tough run in the next couple of weeks. Next week, they've got West Coast. The week after that, they have Richmond. And the week after that, they have Port Adelaide. So they could easily lose the next 3 games and be 1-6 or 1-5, which would not be a good start. And from that position, it's going to be difficult for them to make finals. So they definitely have to get a couple of wins over the next couple of weeks.
I reckon I've said it on this podcast a few times. Saints just like that star. That every top team has that one star week in, week out, can perform. Jack Steele is good, but he's not a star. He's the Jack McRae to the Marcus Bontempelli, except he doesn't have a Bontempelli.
I think I've been saying that for the last couple of years. And then last year, Jack Steele had the very good year. And I thought if he could back that up this year, then maybe it would be a little bit different. But he has been backing it up, but the Saints haven't come with him. So I don't know.
I disagree with what Darcy is saying. He had 35 possessions, 2 goals. But I won't disagree with what Save's saying. However, we have Rowan Marshall back this week. And I think the ruckman, ironically, Darcy was disagreeing with what Xavier was saying before, but I think Rowan Marshall impacts the game for the Saints a lot, and Paddy Ryder as well. And once we get the 1-2 punch back, I think we'll be fine.
But does his impact come in the ruck or in his disposals and goals that he kicks?
Both. He's a jet.
I agree. He's good around the ground, but I don't know if he competes with Gawn and Grundy in the ruck as much.
Let's just say I think we'd rather him than Sean McKernan and Paul Hunter.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was a little bit of an interesting decision from St Kilda, and they didn't really go with what we were saying or what Darcy was saying, as obviously they had their number one and number two preferences in the ruck, not playing in Marshall and Ryder. And then they dropped Paul Hunter and ended up playing Jake Carlisle and Sean McKernan in the ruck, who got 15 and 14 hit-outs respectively. So I think that was interesting, because they didn't go with the ruckman option and they didn't go with the midfield option like Darcy was saying. the other day. Like they could have played, I don't know, Stringer or one of their other midfielders in the ruck.
Stringer.
Yeah, well, Stringer actually,
Stringer
as much
is
as I don't consider him a forward, he's actually first on Essendon
Stringer plays for
in
Essendon.
midfield. Oh, yeah.
There's two takeaways for me. Obviously, Jade Gresham, we hope he gets better quickly, unfortunately, rupturing his Achilles tendon. But also, Jake Carlisle was brilliant. And I know he's getting older, but he was probably the second best player behind Jack Steele for the Saints in the defensive end and in the midfield as well for the Rock. So, a couple of positives, but as you said, the next 3 weeks are extremely tough. So, we'll have to see how they go. The West Coast Eagles on their home floor against the Power, and I managed to tip the Eagles, and brilliant performance by them. And I think Natanui was elite. Jack Redden had 31 disposals and 8 clearances, and Andrew Gaff back to his best.
Yeah, I think the number one takeaway again is Luke Shuey, who had 28 touches and 7 marks, 6 tackles, and was almost best on ground until he got injured. So that's really sad to see again. I think it was a soft tissue injury, which he's had 9 of in the last 12 months, I believe. So I hope he gets better, and I hope he can deal with his issues and come back bigger and better.
I'm going to be honest, I didn't really watch the game. I watched a quarter of it and just bored me a bit. It just wasn't interesting. But a takeaway from it is the 3 games on that day. Would you say that Port Adelaide, St Kilda and Richmond sort of have the same play style of just rush it forward and chaos?
Yeah.
And then they all lost quite significantly on that day. So that poses the question of whether that will work this year and if teams have figured it out, or if it was just a fluke that they all lost by a decent amount on the same day.
Well, yeah, the margins were pretty significant, as you said. The Saints 75, the Eagles 37, and the Tigers 45. So it's definitely something to consider how they're playing. But I think it's 1 week, well, for the Saints 2 weeks, and they'll have to back their form up against the Eagles, which isn't an easy task. But it is in Melbourne, however. They haven't really had a lot of bright spots. I know the Giants win was a good win, but we'll see if Rowan Marshall can impact that.
I think West Coast was really good, though. Every time they got it, they looked like scoring. So I think it might say a little bit more about them than it does about Port Adelaide, which Ken Hinkley alluded to in his post-match interview.
Now to your Blue Boys, Zave, and it was a great win, 45-point win, and Harry Mackay with 7.
We're on the winners board. Moved up to 12th. We're percentage off the 8, or a win off the 8. It's going to be incredible. We're going to win this week. We're going to win the week after that. We've got Gold Coast this week, and then the following week we've got Port Adelaide. So easy wins in both of those. We'll be top 4.
Whoa,
We're going to dominate. Premiership coming up.
I don't think Gold Coast is an easy task at Metricon. We know how it's been in the past. Jack Bowes is a name that you wouldn't really want to hear.
I'm surprised that Gold Coast was your issue with my statement and not the Premiership or Port Adelaide. But yeah, it was. In all seriousness, though. In all seriousness, though, it was a really good performance from us. I think all week we were talked about being soft, which I think we have shown over the last couple of weeks. But David Teague really gave a motivational speech. He said, not anyone gets to pull on the navy blue jersey, and like you have to compete. We brought in Luke Parks for that very reason. Matt Cottrell came in despite only being an emergency, and for Will Setterfield, and I think both of them brought a toughness to the team. We saw a few little scuffles, and the one person other than Harry Mackay who kicked 7 goals 5 with 2 non-registered shots on goal could have been a big night. But the one person I wanted to talk about was Patrick Cripps. And I talked about the knee-jerk reactions, and I think he was one of the players that got written off just off a couple of games. But he had 18 contested possessions, 34 disposals, 2 goals, 6 marks, 3 tackles, 11 clearances. I think he's a beast. He's probably one of the best players in the league. He has been, and he still is. So I think it's really good that he could silence some of the doubters and have a really good game.
All of that at a whopping 60% disposal efficiency.
Well, it's 64%, but that has been the case for ever. So it's not really surprising that that's his disposal efficiency. If you look back, even in his All-Australian years, and when people were calling him close to the best player in the league, he was still disposing of the ball at a similar rate. So it doesn't really surprise me at all. But it's still a ripping game from him. 34 touches, 64% disposal efficiency, 2 goals.
I will say, contrary to your argument of the positives, there's one negative for the Blues, and it's Levi Casbolt. And I did some research this weekend, and according to the official AFL player ratings, Oscar McDonald has been better than Levi Casbolt, except McDonald has been wearing the medical vest for the last 2 weeks. So Levi's obviously not helping the Blues at the moment, and whether it's just a knee-jerk reaction, you've got to question his position at the moment.
No, I don't think that one is a knee-jerk reaction, and I think he needs to be dropped for sure. The only issue is a lot of our players are injured. Will Setterfield was withdrawn, but Caleb Marchbank, Jack Martin, Nick Newman, Zach Fisher, and then the people that play his position, in particular Charlie Curnow and Mitch McGovern, are also injured. And Tom De Koning, who can play a little bit of forward, is out as well. So whilst I say he needs to be dropped, there's not really anyone that we can drop for him. So once those two are fit, I don't think he'll be in the team, but for now, I think you might have to. The other thing that I think he's in the team for is like the secondary ruck, because they haven't been very willing to put Harry Mackay in the ruck, and it's just about the only other option that we have to ruck. But I don't know. I think even to Darcy's point, playing a midfielder in the ruck and then not having him, I think would be a better option.
Cripps in the ruck would be good.
Which actually he has been doing a fair bit. I don't know about against Fremantle, 0 hit-outs, but I know against Collingwood he took all of the forward 50 stoppages, all of the throw-ins, and he tried to do that Tom Hawkins, where that he just pushes them straight out of the way and takes them.
I was going to mention that later, yeah.
He's actually done a fair few times over the last few weeks, so maybe that's leading up to dropping Casbolt, or maybe it's just a new strategy, but I think that can be dangerous for Carlton in the future. A good little weapon.
All right. We'll move on to the Twilight Game on the Sunday, and it was tough for the Giants. They were resilient, but once again, they copped 3 more injuries, and there was timelines on them. It was 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and 10 weeks. And I think 6 weeks was Phil Davis, 8 for Stephen Cornelio, and 10 for Matt DeBoer, who are 3 prominent players for that team. And unfortunately, it doesn't get any easier for them, and I guess they'll have to play a few debutants, but they battled until the final 10 minutes of the game, and the Demons just ran over the top.
Yeah, I won't be tipping GWS for at least the next couple of weeks. So It's been really poor from them to start the season. They're second last on the ladder, only in front of North Melbourne, and we know we've been talking a fair bit of rubbish about them. So I don't think anyone can tip GWS at the moment, which is really surprising because I still think they've got a very talented list despite all the injuries and all of the losses that they've had.
Yeah, there's not a lot of positives for GWS. Melbourne were quite good. Even though Oliver was pretty much kept out of the game for 3 quarters, they still performed quite well. Max Gawn was very good. That was a good performance that did result in a win. So it shows that rucks can have a good impact. But yeah, there's a lot of positives going for Melbourne. They're looking really good. Yeah, I do think Tom McDonald probably needs to step it up a bit if they want to push to the top end of the top 8. But, yeah.
Hey, Melbourne are 3-0 for the first time in 16 years, and I think a major part of that has been Keziah Pickett. In my opinion, the most exciting small forward in the game at the moment, and he's absolutely exceptional to watch. And it's not 2 goals every week; it's 2 goals, maybe even 3, plus the disposals, clearances, and all the goal involvements. So I think he's an absolute gun and one to watch. And obviously the midfield with Petrarca, who was brilliant, Oliver, who was tagged by De Boer and didn't have his best game, but we know he's talented. And yeah, the Demons are looking very, very good, and in my opinion, possibly a chance for finals. Is that a bit harsh to say? Well, not harsh, but
they're a good chance.
Yeah, I think they're a chance. I think, as you said, they're 3-0. They're top 4 at the moment. But I do want to say on Keziah Pickett, I don't think he's the most exciting forward as of yet, but he has been really, really good through the first 3 rounds.
Yeah, isn't it great just seeing a bloke just break out like this at the start of a season? It's just Great to see.
Hopefully he can back it up over the next couple of weeks, because right now we've really only seen 3 good games from him. So if the next 3 are just as good as this 3, then we might have to, as Dylan said, start talking about him in the most exciting small forward role, and maybe even the All-Australian team. But just got to play a couple more good games first.
The final game of the round, the Easter Monday, I was actually at this game, and it was surprising to see the Hawks come back from 5 goals and nearly win it. But CJ Gieth for the Hawks, he's exceptional. His ability to just run and carry in full stride is one for super coaches to consider, and he's a big revelation for the Hawks. And also down forward, they've got some good players, and with Chad Wingard back, they almost managed to beat the Cats, who were too strong in the end by 5 points.
I think there's been a little bit of a knee-jerk as well to Geelong. Despite them winning the game, I've seen a fair bit of their play style isn't going to work anymore. They're not good. But the reality is they're 2-1 at the moment, and Mitch Duncan just came back and played his first game of the year this week. They're still missing Menegola. Dangerfield's been suspended for the last 2 weeks, and Jeremy Cameron has yet to play for them. So I think they've done really well to be 2-1 with missing those key players, as I just said, and they're going to be so much better once they come back. So I wouldn't know quite yet. Pardon?
Menegola as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Geelong's just too good, to be honest. I think it shows a positive for Geelong when they're playing poorly and they're still getting the wins. That's what the good teams do. Well, the great teams do that. So if they can just keep ticking along and just keep building up throughout the season, they'll be right. And I do think Tom Hawkins could be in the debate for the best forward ruckman. You just watch him. He's just such a beast in the ruck. And if I was a professional ruckman, I'd be scared to come up against him.
Yeah, he just bullies people, doesn't he? I think he's over 100 kilos, and he's just made of muscle, and he just moves other 100-kilo men like they're little children. So he's probably the strongest player in the league, I think. But he does make Giants look like boys.
But Cam Guthrie was and has been delightful. Another 43 possessions to his tally. But the Cats play the Demons this week, the unbeaten Demons, which is a tough task, who are 3-0. So that'll be certainly one to watch on the Sunday afternoon. And while we're at it, boys, I'll get your tips for this week. The first game is the Sydney Swans versus the Bombers.
I'm going to take the Swans. 4-0. Good start for them.
Darcy?
Swans.
And the Power versus the Tigers at Adelaide Oval.
I think this is the game of the round. It's going to be a really close one, I think. I'm leaning Port at Adelaide Oval, but then I want to say Richmond because they're going to have to make a statement after their bad loss last week.
Richmond aren't going to lose 2 games in a row. Especially when the first game was like that.
In my opinion, possibly the game of the round, the Bulldogs versus the Lions at Ballarat.
I'm going to say the Bulldogs because it's in Ballarat, but I think this one's a close one as well.
Bulldogs.
Saints, Eagles.
I'm going to go West Coast. They were really impressive last week, and the same can't be said at all for St Kilda.
Yep, West Coast.
Gold Coast, Carlton.
Carlton.
That's a tough game. Collingwood, GWS.
Collingwood. Can't tip GWS anymore.
Collingwood.
North, Adelaide.
Adelaide.
Melbourne, Geelong.
I think that'll be a close one, though, as I said, with Geelong's injuries, and I think Melbourne's proving to be a little bit of a legitimate team. So, but I'm still going Geelong.
And Fremantle, Hawthorn.
Fremantle. It's at Optus, so that tips it over for me.
Yeah, I'll probably go with Darcy as well, but I think it'll be a close one with Fremantle's injuries that they've got at the moment. I'm not sure if Nat Fyfe will come back yet. Could be problematic for my Supercoach team, but we'll see.
Any other words, boys? It's been a long episode, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's a good round of football coming up. I just read the matchups, and I'll certainly be watching the Bulldogs-Lions game, I think, as well as the Saints, obviously. But good luck with your respective teams. I know North have the Crows and the Suns for you, Zabe. So I think you two have winnable games. I'm just saying that for Darce because Adelaide are considered one of the younger lists in the leagues, so a possible chance, but winnable for Carlton as well. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Make sure to like, subscribe, and give us any other ideas of topics or even other sports. But we'll catch you later and hope you enjoyed.
Go Crom.